Hello everybody, this is DuncantheDM. Today my topic for the Kids on Bikes game is your powered character. The powered characters will let you play a supernaturally powered character in the game, but you have to share this resource amongst your other players. The rules for this are very different than any other role-playing and may cause some confusion on how it's handled, so I'm going to go through the rules today, and hopefully this will help make it clear on how to use this character in your game. As the lead narrator, you're going to introduce your powered character to your group as you would any other NPC. Once you do, then that's when you're going to let your players know that this is a powered character and a resource for them to share. When they find them, you want to have it to be some dramatic fashion. Find them in a secret lab, coming out of a car crash with no scratches on them, or some other memorable way that they're found, to help identify that they are something special. If it fits your story better, you could always just introduce them as the new kid in school or the new kid in town, and then versus giving them the dramatic entrance. As the lead narrator, before you introduce your character, you're going to need to come up with some of their backgrounds and their reason for why they're powered. Now, this is stuff that you're going to come up with to fit your story, but when you do it, you may also want to come up with some other personalities, some of the strange behaviors they may have, their motivations and their fears. These will be things that you give to your players to help them know how to roleplay this character when they have that opportunity to. With this character being a shared resource, another key thing you're going to have to come up with is either triggers or how this resource is shared. With the powered character, the control of it is going to be passed when a trigger goes off. These can be physical triggers, emotional triggers, or environmental triggers. Anything that affects the powered character that will change their state of mind. Physical triggers could be they're being touched by somebody they don't know, somebody takes off their hat or takes their stuffed animal from them, or it could be that they get in a fight or a physical altercation. For emotional triggers, it could be that their fears come up. It could be that they're humiliated by another character, or it could be something pleasant, like they get the chance to pet an animal that they care about. Environmental triggers be that the character changes when they hear thunder or when the rain starts. If they're in an area that's too crowded that makes them uncomfortable. Now, with these triggers that you make, you're going to give a couple to each of your players. And whenever these triggers go off, that's going to be the key when the control of the powered character gets passed. From that point on, whoever had that aspect or that trigger is going to control the character until the next trigger goes off that's going to affect them. One thing as the lead narrator you're going to need to include is to include these triggers in your game to make sure that the character gets passed between the players. Giving your character powers. Each of your players should get one power for your character. Suggestions for this power can be found on page 62 of the rulebook. Look through them and see what's appropriate for your game or what you'd like your power character to have. Make sure you keep it in line with the story you're trying to tell, and then give one of each of the powers the character has to each of the individual players. One reason for doing this is another method of sharing the resource. If I have control of the character, but somebody else has a power that I want the character to use, I have to give control of the character over to the person with the power. And then it's going to be up to that person if they want to use the power. Now, later on in the game, if you want to give your powered character more powers or new powers, you're more than welcome to do that. I'll just go around the table giving additional powers to each of the players. When you do it, you typically want to do it through some type of a cinematic reason why they've gotten additional power. It could be like the Hulk, that they triggered their rage. It could be that they were humiliated and embarrassed. It could be that they went back to their lab and found a book about them. Or they run to a scientist who teaches them about how to use one of the powers they didn't know they have. One of the other common questions that come up is what dice do the powered characters get to use? As the lead narrator, when you introduce your character, you're going to let your players know the primary attribute and the weakest attribute for this powered character, as it's easy to identify people's strengths and their greatest flaws. The rest of the attributes will be assigned later on by the players as they continue going through their storytelling and coming up with what makes sense for this character. Now, this can make it difficult when making the rolls because you don't know what dice to assign, and some of the attributes may not have been assigned yet. So there's two ways this can be handled. The first one, which is probably the best way for a one-shot game, is the lead narrator should just assign all the attributes when they make the character. This will be the easiest way to know what all the attributes are, as in a one-shot typically you'll have a time constraint, which makes it difficult to explore more of the character's development. Now, the second method I'd use if you are going to let the players continue to develop their character and explore it. What I'd do for them is any of the stats that have not been defined already, just have them use a D8 for the stat. This is one of the mid-level dice, It's also not the higher of them, so it will encourage the players to help assign the remaining attributes to the character as they continue to define it. The last area I have is the powered characters using their powers. When you introduce a powered character, they're going to have psychic energy tokens. This shows how big their power reservoir is to use their powers. The book recommends to get 7 power energy tokens. If you want, you can make it random. If you do, I'd say roll a d4 and add 5 to the result. When your powered character activates one of the powers, you must use 1 token immediately. These tokens can also be used like adversary tokens to increase the result of your power check. When your players choose to use the power, just like all other checks, you're going to assign a difficulty to determine if the power succeeds. Now for this roll, they will not use any of their regular attributes. They'll just roll 2d4. This will limit their outcomes between 2 and 8. They can still use psychic energy tokens to get to a higher number if you want to make it more difficult. Now with this lower range of numbers that come up, you'll probably want to alter the difficulty rating that you have to account for this. When using a power, if a character fails a check and doesn't use the psychic energy tokens to succeed, one other side effect is that they're going to suffer some type of minor physical impairment. This could be a bloody nose, they could have a muscle spasm, something small like that. And you could also do is if they fail by a lot, you can have them pass out or have some larger effect. Now one optional rule you may want to think about doing is allowing the d4s for the power dice to explode. This will increase the chance that your characters are going to be more likely to succeed, as it increases the average outcome of their rolls. Now one concern with this is d4s are very prone to explode, so it may skew the average result more than you expect. I haven't used this in my game yet, so I don't know how well it works. I'd recommend, if it sounds good to you, to have your group give it a try and see how you like it. If it works out good, let me know. I would appreciate it. Now the last thing for psychic energy tokens is how do your characters get them back? Now this is going to be up to each of the lead narrators on how often you want people to use their powers. In the book it recommends get your psychic energy tokens back at the end of the day after your character rests. Now if you want to limit how often the powers could be used, instead of getting all of the tokens back, you could have them roll, maybe just a d4 or a d6 to determine how many they're going to get back. If you want them to be able to use their powers often, or be very strong with their powers, then definitely give them all their tokens back. Other things you could do to help them get their tokens back would be narrative things. If the player stops and meditates for a while, focusing on their powers. Or it could be related to something that they eat. If they get desserts or something that their character really likes. Or you can make it like Popeye and make them eat spinach, something healthy. One other method you could do to gain psychic energy tokens back is by encouraging role-playing, is by rewarding your players when they do something that is truly in line with what their character would do, or when they have a really good role-playing experience. All these are different ways you could possibly let your players regain their psychic energy tokens and continue to use their powers. In the end, this character is going to be a shared resource. One thing to keep in mind is to make sure that it's a shared resource between your group and that all the players like what is being added to the character. If something new is being added to the character, check with the group to make sure nobody has any objections or is opposed to it before adding it to the character, as everybody will have a turn with the character and may not like those things that get added on. As well as during the character's existence, you're more than welcome to add more backstory to whatever they know. This can be an NPC where you can give players additional information based on the powered character's past or their knowledge. So using the powered character as a shared resource is very unique to the role-playing game settings. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Check out my other videos on the Kids on Bike system. And remember, success will continue to drive the story, but failures will cause your players to expand the story.